So you're new to emergency preparedness and you just don't know where to begin. You don't want to waste time or money. I have been there, and I want you to learn from all of my mistakes back when I was getting started. So here are 5 tips I have learned so that you can save time, energy, and money as you put together your emergency preparedness plan. The first tip is do not shop from a place of fear. So you finally realize that you need an emergency preparedness plan. Maybe you've seen the weather news. Maybe you live in an area that has earthquakes or forest fires or hurricanes. Maybe you're concerned about global climate change and you are really worried about XYZ issue. I understand. I totally get it. And I totally get what it feels like to decide you need to have all of your food storage and water storage and solar power all in place right now. The problem is when you shop from a place of fear, you spend money on things that aren't actually going to benefit you. So back in 2016, I was living in California, known for potentially having the next great big earthquake. And I realized right after the election of Donald Trump that I didn't have any preps in place, no emergency preparedness kit, even though I grew up with all of that stuff in place. I had just neglected it. I was young. I was in my 20s. Nothing could happen. Then Trump got elected, and I realized he was the kind of person that would withhold emergency preparedness responders. He would withhold funding, withhold sending things like FEMA, even by a few hours, to punish California for not voting for him. Now, maybe I'm being a little bit harsh, but I do think he's kind of vindictive like that. And so I was terrified of what would happen if the big earthquake came. I mean, it wasn't impossible. And I had nothing. Like, I don't even have a bottle of water. So I went to the store literally the day after the election and bought out all kinds of stuff that I really couldn't afford, stuff that I didn't really eat, stuff that I wasn't going to use. And it ended up biting me in the butt. Not only did I move like a year later, so I donated it all anyway, I didn't have a place to put any of it. And I bought a bunch of stuff I didn't even eat. I had been a vegetarian for 16 years and had just started eating a little bit of meat for some health reasons. And y'all, I was buying Spam. I don't eat Spam. I don't even eat Spam now that I eat meat regularly, but I bought some because Prepper Internet told me you gotta have rice, you gotta have beans, and you gotta have Spam. And what did I buy? Rice, beans, and Spam. I was shopping from a place of fear and I was panic buying, and it wasn't useful for me. Yes, it meant that I had water and food, but it wasn't food that I really liked. It wasn't food that I could store appropriately. It was food I ended up wasting in a lot of ways. Have you purchased food that you knew you weren't going to eat, but you wanted to leave it on the shelf or you wanted to have it for some reason? I still do this on occasion where I'm like, I want to be the kind of person that really loves XYZ. Comment down below and let me know, do you buy things like that, like foods that you know you don't really like, but you want to have them anyway, or you've been pressured into buying them anyway? I'd love to know that I'm not alone. Second mistake that you should learn from me is that you should know yourself. Know thyself should be the 11th commandment. This is knowing what your real skill sets and interests are, what your budget, both in terms of time, energy, and wealth are, and then invest appropriately. Don't go out and buy a suture kit and an herbalism course and a solar rig and a bunch of rice and beans that have to be packaged in Mylar all in the same week. You probably don't have the bandwidth to actually execute on all of those things. And then the investment of money and then time is wasted. So know yourself. Realistically assess your threats and your risk tolerance. Realistically assess where you're living and what you can do in that space. Realistically assess your budget. You have to know yourself. You have to know your fears and you have to know your actual needs. And that is hard work. But if you take that time, you're going to save time, energy, and money, I promise. The third thing I learned is that food storage must include food storage. And what that means is it's not enough just to have the backup food in place for a rainy day. You need to actually store it appropriately. Case in point, back in 2016, when I was living in California, I bought a ton of rice and beans because that's what preppers tell you to buy, and I did the thing. Now, I was a vegetarian for a long time, so I ate a lot of rice and beans, but I bought 2 giant bags, stuck them in the garage of the house where I was renting a room, and forgot about them for months. I go downstairs to the garage one day, I knew I needed to deal with them, and I was already thinking I might be moving, so I was trying to figure out if this is something worth shipping home with me. It was not. But I found that into the rice bag, some little critter had eaten a hole. So there was rice spilling out of it. It was very clear a bug or some other creature had gotten into the bag of rice. And of course, rice inappropriately stored can have bugs inside the rice itself. So I didn't have the right food storage, and therefore the investment of my time and money into buying the rice and beans was completely wasted. If you're going to have food storage, you need to have the right containers for it. That means food grade buckets or glass jars or a plastic bin or the Mylar bags. However you want to approach this, even if it's short-term stuff like spaghetti and meat sauce, right? You just need to make sure that your food storage has appropriate food storage. So critters or the elements, heating, cooling, damp, doesn't get in and ruin your investment. By the way, if you are new, I want to say welcome. My name is Brecky, and this is Sustainable Prepping, where we empower through preparedness. My goal here is to make sure that everyone, particularly women, are empowered instead of scared when there's a crisis. We want to stay calm in every crisis. We want to be able to maintain options and our ability to lead, and that is why I started this channel. If you're enjoying this video, give me a like. All right, let's not waste any time and get back into it with tip number 4. This is one that we can apply to every area of life, and that is progress is better than perfection. Now, I have a little bit of a perfectionist tendency. I'm not type A by any means, but sometimes I can want to wait until something is perfect. And sometimes you can't do that. You just have to jump in and get started. Now, this isn't to say go panic buy, right? I've just told you not to do that. But it does mean that you might not have the perfect evacuation kit tomorrow, but you can have an imperfect evacuation kit. And that imperfect evacuation kit is going to take you farther than the perfect kit you haven't started. So definitely it is important to take some time to plan, to not panic buy, all of those things. But it is also important not to wait until it's the perfect time or the perfect kit or the perfect setup before you begin your preparedness journey. Would your perfect ideal setup for water storage be a 30-gallon drum that you only have to fill once and it takes care of an entire week's worth of water for your family? Sure, that would be perfect. But there's nothing wrong with getting started with individual gallons of water from the grocery store until you can get to that more perfect place. The point is taking action, even if it is imperfect action, because it's going to move you closer to your goals. My 5th and final tip is one I think a lot of us struggle with, and that is to not let the overwhelm freeze you from action. It can be so easy to see about the issues around global climate change, intense weather, supply lines being weakened and more fragile, the state of possible pandemics around the world. These things can absolutely freeze us from action. We can truly be paralyzed from our fear of the future, our fear of the uncertainty around disasters and how on earth we would survive something like a hurricane, a wildfire, terrible flooding, civil unrest. We could name all the things that you might have come to this channel looking for a preparedness plan for. That fear is not serving you. That fear is not empowering you. It's disempowering you. And I want you to stay in your power. And the best way to do that is to push through the fear, to make your plan, and then to execute on the plan. You don't have to turn preparedness into your next hobby. You don't have to become a prepper and start planning for a bunker in your basement, but you can start planning for real disasters and move through the fear into action. That is the whole point of why I'm here. I want you to be able to move through the fear both as you're planning and you're preparing for the potential crisis, and then when you get to that crisis. Once you know that you can survive a major grid down situation because you have your lights, because you have your backup food, because you have a way to cook what you have, because you have some backup medical supplies and so on, you're going to be able to lead. You're going to be able to stay calm. You're going to be able to be confident that you have choices available to you. So don't let the fear of all that unknown, all that uncontrollable future keep you from taking action. Additionally, don't let that fear motivate you to go back to tip 1 and hoard resources, buy everything now, panic, right? None of that serves you. Feel the fear, move through the fear, and then take action on the plan you're putting in place today. If you're brand new to emergency preparedness, there is a ton of ground to cover. If you want to get a quick start guide, these are my 5 fundamentals. They're going to give you the 5 basic areas you need to cover and help walk you through how you can do that. So I'm going to leave that video right there for you. I'll make sure it's linked in the description too, so you can find it. But until the next video, y'all, happy prepping.